Good afternoon. I welcome you to the third episode of Liliana Talks. We meet today in a very special gathering. To my right, Aaron Koreva, Director of the Atlantic Council's Warsaw office. Thank you very much for joining us today. And Katia Elizabeth Herman-Eufrasio, Research Fellow at Warsaw Institute. Hello, Katia.
Hello.
In less than a week, a NATO summit will be held in Vilnius, and Jens Stoltenberg announced that the Vilnius summit will make key decisions for the future of NATO. So, Aaron, my first question is, what might those decisions be?
Well, are we talking about Ukraine specifically, or
yes, specifically Ukraine?
Well, the thing is, there will definitely be decisions on Ukraine.
Yes.
The problem is that I can't say for sure if they're going to be good or bad. That's the unfortunate. That's
okay.
the good side. The good thing is, good news and bad news.
Yeah.
The good news is there will be something about Ukraine. The bad news is that I can't say.
Well, I was expecting, more positive,
well,
news from you.
Unfortunately, because there should be. I mean, absolutely, there should be good decisions on Ukraine, and we all know what those decisions should be. Ukraine should be granted a clear path towards membership. I'm not so sure if that's going to happen this time, though. What we can. If I was betting, I would say that people the leaders of the free countries will understand the gravity of the situation and offer Ukraine something that is way better than yet another Bucharest-ish declaration, because that's not going to cut it.
Yeah, because Anders Rasmussen, he recently said, and he also believed that actually this NATO summit will be super important and it will change the reality. But I'm wondering if there could be some kind of a consensus on the issue of Ukraine. But as you already mentioned, you are not sure if.
There could be. There absolutely could be. And the thing is that, to be honest, I think that the problem is actually not so much in Europe, but more in the United States.
Okay.
Because if you look at the Europe, we often have we know that the Poles are showing some leadership here. The Baltic states are countries who are very much forward-looking. There are countries like, say, the Scandinavians, who are their hearts is in the right place, but they're not pushing forward on this. I mean, for obvious reasons, they're mostly concerned with Sweden, I suppose, with Swedish membership. But there are plenty of countries in the West as well, who are sort of in the Western Europe, who are coming around to this more. I mean, recently we heard that the French are actually saying that Ukraine should be a member of NATO. And there are other countries there that are sympathetic to this cause. The Netherlands comes to mind, Britain, of course. I mean, even Canada. So I think that there is an opportunity for a country like Poland to try to build a more broader coalition, and then approach the United States saying, look, there actually is consensus on this. Stop digging your heels in here, Washington, and show some, take the final right step and be a leader in this matter. Because yes, it is high time to do it. Yes, of course, Ukraine should be offered a membership in NATO. It's a no-brainer, really.
That's true. And Katia, what do you think? Will the summit be a breaking one in the case of Ukraine and also some other decisions?
Well, it's definitely going to be a turning point. First of all, it's going to be the first summit that Finland is already incorporated into NATO. I mean, it's going to be like 31 member states, which is already like an odd number, right? Which could be decisive. We saw a little bit of controversy before Finland accession with regards to Hungary and Turkey imposing the veto vote. But I think that the allies have established already a sort of consensus. I mean, as Aaron said, this is the breaking point where we can also show unity. Poland has a very important role to play in this regard. And definitely it's going to be a little bit determinant when it comes to, looking at the US elections. I mean, it's definitely going to be a point of discussion in domestic elections. And obviously the United States does not want to portray itself into a point that can contest or can cost the elections, either for the Republicans or the Democrats, right? When it comes to Ukraine, I think that this discussion has been going since the beginning of the war, that we need Ukraine to be part of NATO the same way that Ukraine needs to be part of NATO. So NATO needs Ukraine needs NATO. However, I am afraid, looking at the whole landscape, I'm afraid this is going to take a little bit longer than just in the next few weeks. I mean, I don't think that this is going to break to the point that we already are putting into place a vote to include Ukraine. However, I must confess that the analysis that have been presented, the points that are going to be breaking in this summit are going to be on investment. So we have, and we will definitely discuss this in further in
So
detail.
you mean the reconstruction of Ukraine, or what kind of
No.
investments?
I refer more particularly to the defense investment pledge,
Okay.
where we will, NATO will pledge to an increase of investment in defense in three main areas.
Yeah.
Which will include capabilities, not only commitment, because commitment it's called the three C's actually. Commitment, capabilities, and cost. Two of the main areas are going to be cost and capabilities, but I mean, we can go further into detail, but I mean, as preliminarily on the breaking point, it will be political, but not, in my perspective and in my analysis, not to the point of exceeding Ukraine yet.
Okay. You mentioned the defense sector and also increasing the percentage of GDP that countries should be actually willing to pay to the defense sector. And I think Poland is also leading here because our government has announced 4% of GDP on the defense sector, and maybe even more in the future if it will be needed. Aaron, you mentioned also the importance of Poland and Baltic states. Who are the part actually of the 3Cs initiative, and what do you think is the importance of 3Cs initiative for the US?
Well, I think the three Cs initiative is a great opportunity for the U.S. for investment. I mean, we often think about it in terms of reconstruction and charity, and it's not reconstruction and charity; it's a business opportunity. And again, it's really a no-brainer, because if you have well-constructed infrastructure north to south, and you use that to build in economic resilience in this area, well, then you have another layer of security, something that doesn't require a large amount of troops and soldiers. I'm talking about the long run here, right? So, and this is not just, and this isn't a matter of Russia, it's also a matter about China. Because if you have, again, you have the infrastructure, well, then you don't need the Chinese. The countries here are not going to ask for Chinese investment because they're going to have the infrastructure that they need. And of course, you need infrastructure that goes north-south. In this region, you can't. The legacy of the former Russian dominance of this area is, of course, that all the infrastructure goes to the east. But you can create these sort of arcs of stability in places like the Central Eastern Europe.
No, I completely agree. Also, Poland, I think, is a good example of it. Just last year, Poland has signed a contract with Westinghouse, American company, to build the first nuclear power plant. That should start operating in 2033. So I believe it also somehow covers some of the energy securities in the region. We signed another contract for the LNG supplies also from the United States to Poland. And I believe because of our interconnectors, we will somehow secure the region, or we will be able to help the region in the case of energy. And Katja, so I asked Aaron about the importance of 3Cs for the US, and what do you think, whether, there's some kind of importance of the US for the 3Cs,
Right. So I will take a little bit a step further. I mean, you debated on energy, precisely this agreement with Poland and American firms. I think the 3Cs initiative, and as a general initiative, and also like specific projects that have been enacted, it is incredibly valuable to the United States, because it has the potential to position the United States once again into this part of Europe in a different framework. That is on the holistic level. On a more particular level, let's remember that it is about transport, not only about energy or the digital domain and interconnectivity as transport as well. And one of the links, and Aaron mentioned it, is resilience. And resilience, well, let's remember that NATO Article number 3 is also about resilience, right? So what the 3Cs initiative actually facilitates is the transportation of military equipment. And this is something that it has been pressing from the last couple of years, that the corridors have always been from west to east or from east to west, but rarely had there been enacted or have they been constructed from north to south. And this is the precise intention of the 3Cs initiative. Now that we have this pressuring of energy, where Lithuania and Estonia were dependent on Russia, now they've broken the dependency. Now it's the time to actually connect Lithuania to Bulgaria or to Romania. There are connections that were not that very clear before. And when it comes to military mobility, or I mean, when we speak under the framework of PESCO as well, that is collaboration with NATO and the European Defence Agency, we require this mobilization, we require this means of transport that actually enhance the mobility of armament, which is exactly what we want to speed up. Much discussion has been about preparedness and readiness, and so these keywords that it is not only about how fast can we gather the troops or how fast can we secure information, but also how fast can we deploy. And if we don't have the infrastructure to deploy fast, then we're not doing our job properly. And I think that the 3Cs initiative in this parameter, at least in transport and logistics, has the potential to address these key points.
No, I completely agree. Like, I think 3 points of the 3Cs initiative, is, of course, energy, transportation and digitalization. Right. And I'm encouraging our viewers to check our recent report on the importance of railways, because I think especially war in Ukraine has showed how important it is.
Right.
So actually staying within Ukraine, but maybe going a little bit more to the east and Russia. Maria Zakharova, the spokesperson for the Russian Foreign Ministry, has recently said, let me quote, Russia's nuclear deterrence policy is strictly defensive. The hypothetical use of nuclear weapons is clearly limited by extraordinary circumstances within the framework of strictly defensive purposes. But she also mentioned that they can use it in certain dire situations. Aaron, what do you think? How does the United States approach the nuclear warnings from Russia?
Not that great. I count myself, I put myself to sleep by counting how many times Russia uses this nuclear threat. To be honest, I encourage everybody to, normally I wouldn't do this, but go back and listen to Putin's speech from February 22nd, when he says that anybody who helps Ukraine, there's going to be terrible consequences. I'm paraphrasing, dire consequences. Okay. Poland and the Baltic states have been helping Ukraine from day one. I don't see any mushroom clouds around here. In Rzeszów, where nearly all of the equipment is going through, yes, there are some British and American soldiers there, sure, but any kind of strike or something in Rzeszów would disrupt the weapon deliveries and will create serious problems. What exactly have the Russians done in Rzeszów? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. What have they done in Poland in general, really, if you think about it? Not much. Yeah, they dialed up their propaganda, but I mean, most Poles are immune to Russian propaganda anyway.
That's true. We have it in our blood.
Exactly. Yes, there's been an increase in cyber attacks, sure, with pretty high, actually, something like 300%, but not against critical infrastructure. Yeah. So, again, this is a bluff. This is a bluff. The way to handle, you can criticize Emmanuel Macron for other things, but I think he actually handled the Russian nuclear threats very well. This was early on in the war. He said something to the effect of, duly noted, we have nukes too. Yeah, that's the way to do it. I mean, I know that some of our viewers or anything might get a little freaked out when we talk about this, but let's think about this for a second. What kind of nuclear strike is he talking about? I mean, obviously, he's not going to use his strategic weapons against the United States, because the United States has strategic weapons as well, and that's the end of Russia. So that's off the table. So what does he have left? We were talking about a tactical nuke in Ukraine. Well, what exactly is that going to achieve? A tactical nuclear weapon in a major city is not a doomsday scenario. That's not going to wipe out the entire city. That's just a matter of fact. Yes, a lot of people are going to die, and it's terrible, but the Ukrainians are not going to fold because something like that. And what options remains? Is he going to use in the battlefield, like to blunt the counteroffensive? Okay, he's going to kill a lot of Ukrainian soldiers, sure. But again, the Ukrainians are not going to fold for that either. And is he going to then tell his Russian soldiers, hey guys, time to go in there and occupy that territory? I mean, given what just happened in Russia, I don't think that is something he's seriously contemplating. So my point about all this is that, unfortunately, the United States still starts acting a little shaky every time that happens, and allows the other side to have some form of escalation, which is a terrible idea. Putin does this because he sees the reaction, right? Yeah. He sees that we're scared of it. If we told him that we are scared of people with green faces, he would have probably painted all the soldiers in green faces. Because I mean, again, it's a no-brainer. Of course he says that because the predictable reaction. Stop reacting this way, and he's not going to do that.
So you mentioned the recent events in Russia. So I will ask you, what do you think, what we can expect with the fact that Wagner's group right now is in Belarus, And should we as Poles be, concerned about it, especially if we're thinking about the hybrid war that already happened on the Polish-Belarusian border?
There is always a reason to be concerned about some of Wagner Russia, but again, let's be clear here. I mean, I don't know, I might be wrong here, but looking at some of the numbers that people mentioned, Prigozhin was talking about something like 25,000 Wagner or something like that. Well, that's just a number that he threw out. If you look at the casualty numbers, it's more likely something like 10,000, which is not. I mean, okay, it's still a force for sure, but it's not something that he could invade another country with. And by the way, as far as I know, there aren't that many Wagner guys who have actually followed Prigozhin into Belarus at this point. We have this. I mean, again, at the end of the day, the Russians are human beings, just like every. I mean, I know it's hard to think about it that way, but they are. And so, if you're going to tell them, after all the casualties they suffered in trying to take Bakhmut, are you going to tell these people like, oh well, now you're going to attack, I don't know, Ukraine or Poland even, which is a NATO country, from Belarus? I don't think so. So, and also, like, if I was Lukashenko, I wouldn't want, Wagner running around in my country doing crazy
that's
things.
Another point,
Right.
No, I mean,
if you want to have the power as one certain person.
Yeah, no, for
I
sure.
don't know if you want to have,
I mean, for people, again, for us to start,
foreign,
for us to start freaking out, maybe using it that way, sure. And I mean, from Putin's perspective, get them out of here or whatever. But it's not. It's still more of a. It's still, they should be nervous about all this rather than.
It is ridiculous, And Katya, what do you think about this nuclear warnings from Russia? Do you perceive them, as a threat or just another
bluff?
Exactly.
Well, I think Aaron has rightly pointed out. I mean that this mechanism has always been used. I mean, raising these points, raising these threats, but tangibly, I mean, I'm not actively encouraging for him to test his threats, but it has been resonated since even the war began. We also heard at some point in Georgia, I mean, and this is actually not as effective as it is precisely because we have changed our reaction. We have demonstrated also a united front. I mean, I think Aaron has addressed all these points to the point. What I'm more concerned is about the Wagner group. So just yesterday, we were discussing this with some colleagues back in the United States and also with some experts on the matter, both in Russia and in Poland and Belarus. Now, there are some sorts of confusion as what was behind, what was in between, and what can come later. So what was behind the relationship between Prigozhin and Putin? What was behind the whole Wagner group? I mean, who is actually giving the accountability, or to who are they actually responding? I mean, is it you, as we are, Putin directly? And we were discussing this precisely. And what is the actions, the further intentions? I mean, according to the sources discussed yesterday, Prigozhin was not even in Rostov. I mean, so he stayed behind. And if they are eventually going to Belarus, I mean, to who are they going to respond? I mean, is it going to be to Lukashenko, or is it going to be to Putin? Now that the relations are as fragmented as it is. Now, Aaron rightly pointed out that not all the soldiers followed. But the question is, where are these soldiers now, and who are they going to respond to? Are they going to be independently? Are they going to fragment as well? So a lot of things are still on the table, and there are question marks about certain points and about different points. Now, what interests me the most is the circumstances. Why are they going first on a strategic and tactical level? We can speak and we can, definitely draw it on the map. But for the sake of simplicity, why marching from Ukraine to Rostov and then deviating from Rostov to Belarus? Now, what is less talked about is the criminal charges that they instated against Prigozhin. Mm-hmm. The criminal charges and then the subsequent drop of these criminal charges. Now, what happened there, it's a source of confusion that even yesterday we were not able to figure out. Now, it was an open discussion, but still it raises a lot of questions about what is the future and how long and for what reason are they going to stay in Belarus. Now, Lukashenko might as well hire them to prevent Putin from annexating Belarus, right? Yeah. So there are certain, and it's interesting to view this from a holistic, and it's also important to view it from a holistic and not or not dismissing only the relationship between Prigozhin and Putin.
Yeah, but it's, I think, quite difficult because Wagners, they will work for the one who's paying more. So I don't know if it's the case of Lukashenko, but well, we will see.
Precisely.
Yes, so we need to observe the situation very, very carefully. So going more to the east, let's go now to China. I have the feeling that even though in Europe we're now experiencing the energy transition, and we became almost like 100% independent from the Russia raw materials, Russian energy sources. But at the same time, we are having this, let's say, authoritarian swap. So we're becoming independent from Russia, but at the same time, now we're becoming a little bit more dependent on China.
Right.
Aaron, do we have anything to worry about, And here I'm talking about the air flow materials, chips, all of the components of renewables, and actually electronics.
No, for sure. I mean, China is in many ways a far bigger challenge than Russia ever was, because from Russia, some countries unwisely became dependent on Russian raw materials, but we don't really need Russia for anything. We don't need that hydrocarbon stuff because we need to do green transition anyway. The only thing we need from Russia is for Russia to behave, which, that can be achieved by deterrence. So it's not something that you can do on a dime like that, but it is fairly straightforward. China is way more complicated. During the Cold War, the economic exchange between the two blocs was almost nothing. Now we are economically intertwined. And in many ways, we brought this problem upon ourselves by believing that simply by trade and interdependence, China is going to reform, and that's clearly not going to happen. Now, China basically, they differ from Russia in this. They both China and Russia want to make the world safe for authoritarian powers. But the Chinese believe that they have time on their side by simply making themselves what they call like the indispensable country for everybody, to tie everybody in so close with China that in any kind of given situation you would want to avoid any kind of conflict with China. And so that's a serious problem, absolutely. But there is some waking up on that matter, for sure. And I mean, again, there's just a clear example. I mean, back in the Cold War, you couldn't sell a PC to the Soviet Union because of the dual use, right? And now we basically made China into what it is by giving them pretty much all of our technology. So it's crazy in many ways what we've done. But the good news is that these authoritarian countries are usually their own worst enemies. China, there was a time where people were believing that, China is, it's benevolent, they just want to trade, yada, yada. Well, and lo and behold, here we have someone like Xi Jinping and the Wolf Warrior diplomacy, and very quickly, authoritarian systems like that, they often shoot themselves in the foot and just simply, go too far before and show their true face in a way that waves away any kind of doubts as to what they truly are. I think China has done that, and, we are wising up.
Yes, we're wising up, but at the same time, when we're looking at the European economies, I think the best example of it is actually German economy. Before, in the past, they were the pioneer in the case of automobile sector. And unfortunately, China overtook Germany, and now they are producing the biggest amount of cars with the electric vehicles. And as we all know, other European economies are anchored to the German one. So I'm wondering if they will be experiencing some crisis, then the other countries will be also experiencing the crisis, because we're all connected. Katja, what do you think? Can we also fear some espionage? Because there were some news recently that Nike company signed a contract with some Chinese anti-chain company. So there are a lot of links. Can we fear some espionage or some interruptions?
Well, let's remember that commercial espionage has always been a tactic of the Chinese. It has, in part, commercial espionage is one of the founding elements of why China has gone ahead of Western economies. And I'm afraid that up to a certain extent, yes, we do have to fear. But to what extent can we tackle this without also damaging our own economies? If we want to limit, and it's very interesting to wanting to raise competitiveness, open market, but at the same time regulating certain elements that would put us almost in a silver platter towards espionage. Now, yes, my short question would be yes. We do have it. But now, what can we do to tackle it? That is going to be the main challenge.
And this is the question to Aaron. How can we, as let's say the Western world, so US and their allies, how can we win actually the battle with China? I mean the technological battle.
With China?
Yes!
That's the 1 million question.
Well, that's a $1 million
You know,
question.
if someone is listening to
Yeah,
us, this
sure.
is the solution.
This is the, so full disclosure, I'm not a China expert, I'm not a tech expert either,
Of
but
course.
thanks for it. Well, anyway, no, I mean, look, here's the thing. Yes, the Chinese are good at a lot of things, sure, but so are we.
Yes.
And I, as an American, would I want the U.S. economy to always remain bigger than the Chinese economy? Sure. Am I losing sleep over the fact that it's not going to? No. And why? Because the U.S. and the European Union and Japan and Australia, meaning the Western powers together, they are far bigger than China together. And they will be bigger than China for a long time. And we have a network of allies and partners that the Chinese don't even come close to, because all that they do is just buying people off or scaring them, right? So it's not the same thing. And we have, at the end of the day, we have the potentials and the strong cards on our hands, but we do need to think about these things a little bit more strategically, not that, cut the cost short term kind of thing. But that goes both ways, by the way, because yes, as I said before, we've put ourselves in this situation. We can unwind ourselves from it, but it's not going to work if, for instance, that Americans come to Europe and say, now we just do this. That's not going to work, because the American economy and the European economy is a little bit different in that respect. That's just the way it is. And so the good news is that a lot of things are happening. We're looking at the chips manufacturing, for example, semiconductors, where the U.S. is building these partnerships. But it's going to take some time. But things are sort of moving in the right direction. Hopefully, they're moving fast enough. And in many ways, the Chinese never cease to remind us as to why this is important. And I'm an optimist who worries a lot, insofar that in the long run, I do believe that we have the cards in our hands. It's just a matter of playing.
Thank you. And
Right.
Katja, would you like to add something?
Well, I mean, I'm also an optimist, but I can see also, I did most of my research was in semiconductors and how exactly this investment is driving the U.S. conversations. Well, drove the U.S. conversations last year when the EU Chips for American Chips Act was passed, and then subsequently the European Chips Act exactly was passed, and how they combine and what kind of synergies they created. Now, just as a brief background story, I mean, definitely the American Chips Act is way more substantial than the European one. In terms of investment and in terms of scope. Now, Europe has certain limitations, but that doesn't mean that we're gonna stop cooperating. What the words, an element or a point that worried the entire conversation and the entire political sphere, and also in Brussels, was to what extent this could drive the partners apart. Because there's a fine line between competition and protectionism. And protectionism was something that was worried being discussed. I mean, as potential risk and a potential confrontation between the U.S. and the European Union. Why? Because definitely chips is a material that the European Union requires for their automobile industry. Not as substantial as, and this we can get into a technical aspects on the size of the material, whatever. I do worry on 2 points. We have the technology, Aaron already pointed out. We have the IPs, which intellectual property rights. We have the science. We have the know-hows. But China still dominates on the raw materials. And despite the fact that we don't want to believe it, I mean, they still control one of the biggest sources, which is silicon. Now, we can transition into other raw materials. Poland has been doing great on photo semiconductors. They're different than silicon. They use photons instead of atoms. Fantastic technology, by the way. I invite our viewers to also look it up, because it's also revolutionary. It's not as advanced, but still. So I stay optimistic, but I still look at the reality on the numbers and how on the landscape, political landscape, we can take our difference to the side and still continue to cooperate. We have the concern of protectionism, but still we want, as a bloc, to continue growing our economies. And for that, we will see as well how the political and economic landscape comes into being after the elections, the United States elections. So we will still remain to see.
No, I believe that the Russian aggression on Ukraine has accelerated the energy transition process in Europe because, well, actually we realized that we don't have much, energy sources that will be enough for the whole region. So we need to actually invest in those technologies that can satisfy our energy needs. And I think that's the only way that we will somehow survive and we will be competitive on a global scale. Thank you very much to our guests. Thank you very much, Aaron. Thank you very much, Katja, for joining me today. And I also encourage our viewers to watch our next episode and to follow our social media. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.